Now let me put it to you this way. When we dream, we have a space in the dream. And in that dream, we have a dream body. All the dream bodies in the dream are subject to destruction. But whatever happens in the dream doesn't affect the dreamer.
So if you guys look at your program, we're going to have remembrances by friends who would like to speak. Rod, tell me about what scopes did you make and how, like...
Well, I met John in '68, and I was thinking of the little 6-inch thing, you know. That was the biggest I could go, but he said, no, don't even bother with anything smaller than a 10. So I made something sort of like this, a 10-inch f8 Newtonian, which is, it's on its 5th generation now and still looking at stars. So.
After you met John, you decided to go into the industry?
Somewhat, yeah. I pushing glass kind of got in my blood, and then I ended up working at, for 30 years pushing glass at Lawrence Berkeley National Labs. So. Except I had machines to do that for me then.
So Gerard, where's Gerard? Behind you. Yeah. So tell us about the scopes that you made with John.
Well, I met John in 1974, 75 in high school. And me and my friend Eric used to drive up to San Francisco and see him, and eventually we saved up $50 for a 16-inch porthole, and we used to go to Fremont Peak with Bob Kestner and everybody. Eventually lived at the Sidewalk Astronomer headquarters at 1600 Baker Street, and many of us were there. And we eventually got a tube. I think it was like a 12-foot tube, and we hauled it upstairs, and we figured the mirror. John and I figured that upstairs on the 2nd floor.
Oh, geez.
And we wanted to punch it out the window, but that would have stuck into Baker Street, and the police probably would have called. That became Long Eye, right? And that fell off the trailer on the way to the Grand Canyon and all that.
So you have to tell the story about...
Well, we were good telescope makers, but I certainly wasn't an engineer and certainly not a trailer builder. And so, you know, the park system gave us 1-inch plywood, and we rebuilt the rocker. And the mirror was in the van, so it was okay. And then after that, by '79, Bob had started working at Tinsley Labs, and then I joined later in '79, late '79. And
yeah, my experience is a little similar to Gerard's. I was 12 years old when I ran into John. I went to one of his telescope making classes at the Lindsay Museum in Walnut Creek. And I had just gotten from Christmas a 60 millimeter department store refractor, and I was very proud of this. I'm sitting there 12 years old, and I tell him I'm very proud of my telescope, and I want to. And he takes the opportunity to explain to me the difference between a telescope and these department store telescopes, and he is very abrupt about that. I'll never forget it. So I fell in love with John there, and I spent the next probably 8 years, you know, sort of being a student of John's with the telescopes. Went through all the classes for astronomy, his cosmology, his theories. It was very, very inspiring, and so, you know, like Gerard here, it led me to a career in optical fabrication. Worked out really well for me. So John had an absolutely profound influence on my life.
didn't you make the corrective optic for the Hubble?
Well, yeah, that falls into the part of that John talks about, the modesty part, right?
Yeah. Well, you should get credit for that.
So it is quite true that John had nothing to do with the original Hubble telescope, but every single picture that's come out of the corrected Hubble telescope was made with a team of opticians, some of which, and the key elements of which, were influenced by John.
So, Jeffrey, What's your connection?
Hi everybody, I'm Jeff Roloff. I met John when I was in high school, probably less than 6 months after he got out of the monastery. He was on the streets in probably Jackson or Broderick and ended up making a telescope. We tried to join the San Francisco Amateur Astronomers and they would not have anything to do with us. So we said, we're going to make our own organization. And I was talking with John and I said, we can call it the this or the Sidewalk Astronomers or the, and he said, no, it's the Sidewalk Astronomers. So I came up with the name, the Sidewalk Astronomers.
Remember, favorite statements I had is one time he was at the Girlay Square and he was saying, come look at the moon, and there was this woman going by and she had kind of like furs on, you know, she's obviously down there for some big event or fundraiser or something, and she looks at him and she says, I don't believe I want to see the moon tonight. and he, this is so John, he looked at her and he said, be sure not to look south. That's what he said.
There's an interesting story that I like, which is we were all lined up at 24th and Sanchez doing sidewalk astronomy, and there was a false alarm, and the fire trucks came up 24th and turned onto Sanchez, and then immediately turned around and came back, and the last truck stopped and asked me, what are you doing? And I said, I'm looking at Saturn. And he opened the door, got out, came across the street, leaving the van right there in the middle of the street, and looked up and, oh my goodness, and he went back and he called all the other units back, and there were all these fire trucks now looking at what's going on.
Taking John's class and all of us glass pushers out here, the best advice I ever got from John was in the first class, and he was talking about how to make mirrors and everything, and what he said was, if you're going to break your glass, break it early. And of all the advice I've gotten in my whole life, that was probably the best advice I've gotten.
Yeah, one of the things about the class is that he really wants everyone to finish the class and have a telescope that they can use and that they can use to share with others. And so he was more concerned about finishing than finishing with a perfect product. And so I actually bought these books on telescope making. I got Richard Berry's book on telescope making and some of the others, and I was reading these books. And one of the things I didn't realize when I was taking this class is that John's methods for telescope making are completely different than the ones that are in the book. And I think there was at one point in the class where I asked him a question. It was about some aspect of mirror grinding, and my question, it had an element of something I had read in the book. And he just turns to me and he looks at me and he says, "You've been reading a book." Heresy, yeah, because his methods were so streamlined and they were designed to get you to an end state. If you followed the more fancy method that was in these books, you would have people who would never finish their telescopes.
Yeah, my name's Alan Bredin, and I grew up in Moss Beach, which is normally fogged in about 7-8 months of the year. And I always wondered why I was interested in astronomy. The thing is, we saw the stars down there so few times a year, I wanted to know what they were and what they're about. So probably I was 13, so that puts it about 1969 or so. I went up and took one of John's telescope making classes at Jewish Community Center. The first time I was there, I saw Jeff Roloff, who I haven't seen till today.
Wow.
And I looked through his telescope and I saw Saturn and I was sold. And then I made an 8, and it took me a while to make an 8. I was 13 and John had to come down to our house a couple times and help us out. I felt honored to know him. He really expanded my horizons. I learned what those things were I was seeing in Moss Beach. And I'd say I was sorry to see him gone, but he lived almost 99 years. And he did exactly what he wanted to do, so he had a good life.
My grandparents' property in Sacramento is adjacent to the Vedanta Society. And when I was 10, I first met John in 1961. He was grazing out on our property and teaching us what to eat out there. And my mother made the horrible mistake that Christmas of buying us a telescope. You would think that she had invited Satan into our house. The reaction, John was so disgusted by this thing, he said, take it back to the store. He goes, let's go get a porthole and I'll make the kids a real telescope. So he and my mom started, they came down to the city, salvaged all the things. One of my favorite John stories is once a beehive moved into my mom's peach tree, and John went out completely, bare armed, no protective gear on, and he broke the branch. He was covered in the hive, and then he gently walked it about 5 acres away to the waiting hive for it.
Just like most of you guys, made telescopes with John, made a telescope from Cal Academy, taking a class there. But I also worked with John doing something that I liked even better, which was going to schools with him. So I went to schools with him a number of times, and at that time I was working at Apple, and I kept telling him, well, you could use a computer, you could do this and this, and he'd say, can you just carry this carousel? And that's it. He always wanted to do those carousels. The carousels with the slides. And I love to hear those kids and just all those oohs and ahs when he would talk about stuff. That was my favorite thing.
When we were up at Glacier Point with the Sidewalk Astronomers, he would have us hike down to the valley floor to get groceries and hike back out the 4 Mile Trail. Yeah, with the groceries. That's how we got our groceries.
Quarts of yogurt.
With quarts of yogurt and yeah.
John was an honorary director of Stellafane, and for those of you who don't know what Stellafane is, it takes place in Springfield, Vermont, and it's telescope makers once a year come from all over the world, and a few thousand converge on these several acres of land, and John would be there, and under this pole barn he would be pushing glass. They would do demos, and on the first night we were sitting together, and the MC gets up on the stage and says, I want you all to know that John Dobson is here, and my God, there were 750 people in there, and it was standing room, so it's plus, okay? It was pouring rain outside the pole barn, and they stood up, and it was like he was a rock star. They started clapping and screaming and whistling, and here's John sitting, he wouldn't get up. And the MC says, okay, John, come on, get up and say to him. John says to me, I'm not going up there. I go, John, you kind of have to do it, I mean, and he goes, no, I'm not. And I go, I didn't know what to say, so I went, John, it's love. It's all love. And he looked shocked. He got up and he said, okay. And he went up. He went up on the stage and he said, well, I'm all glad you're here, and the speaker is so-and-so, and I hope you really enjoy him. And he gets down from the stage, and these people never stop screaming, whistling, I mean, standing ovation. You couldn't believe it. He's like, get me out of here. He was really, but that's what they thought of him, and how humble he could be at times, really. So,
I see a lot of people today that haven't seen me since I was, about yay big. That's nice. I grew up sleeping in that giant ass telescope right there. Traveling around in the big orange van all summer long. We'd go around to the national parks. We'd stop at Crater Lake and go up to Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, and star parties, and what a great time over the summer. My mom once said that on the last day when they put that body in the box, the mouth will still work. And I hope through all of you that she was right. So thanks.
Maya viva vijrampayatyapi maha yogi vaya Svechaya Tasmai Shri Guru Murtaye Namayadam Shri Dakshina